This is Jason Antonoff with IMT, and today we'll have our presentation by Debbie Slow of Resource Media on reports that sing. I know a lot of the cities are just past the initial reporting season, at least for building owners to report in, and now it's time to start taking that data and put together some annual reports that you can then share out, the printed reports or even information being shared on the website. So this should be a good presentation to sort of explain what can be done to make sure that when you share that data out, it will actually have the maximum impact, so we can really drive the sort of change you want to see in the marketplace. So I also want to have a shout out to Debbie and thank her for doing this presentation. I apologize for the timing. I know we had to slip it in the day just before many of you and many that aren't on the call are heading off for the holidays, but this is Debbie's last Thursday and almost last week in the office before she takes off on her well-deserved sabbatical. So Debbie, thanks for squeezing this in on one of your last days working.
Thank you.
Sure. Thanks for all your hard work over the past few years. And I'll turn it over to you and let you tell us how to make our report sing.
Great. Thank you, Jason. Thanks so much for inviting me to present today. And I've met many of you virtually and some in person, but I was just hoping that the folks from the different cities, if you could just peep up and let me know who's there and which cities are represented today.
I'm Rupal, and I'm from Philadelphia.
Jennifer Gunby from Kansas City.
Great. Congratulations, Kansas City. So thanks, you two, for being. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Sorry, Katrina Manigan in Denver.
Oh, great. Hi, Katrina. You know, given the holiday weekend, we just have a couple of you here, but really thank you for taking this this time out of your last day, I'm sure, before a nice long holiday to listen in. So as Jason mentioned at the top of the call, and as I know just from my working with Rupal and what's been happening in Kansas City as well, a lot of you are sort of right in the thick of things in terms of, you know, recently passed a benchmarking policy or in the throes of implementing one or working to hopefully pass one in the future. So if you aren't already, soon you're going to be faced with collecting and analyzing energy data on thousands of buildings in your city. And an important part of that job will be to use the data to help convince decision makers and the real estate community that benchmarking policy is working to move the market and to achieve greater energy savings. And more than likely, you'll be using reports to help you make your case. So reports can be immensely powerful communication tools if they're packaged and promoted well. So it's really important that we get them right. So in this talk right now, I will be covering why reports are important communication tools, the challenges of using reports as communication tools, strategies for improving reports, including ways to package and promote the information, make reports come alive with visuals and interactive features and more. I'll also give you some tips for pitching reports to the media. And throughout the presentation, I'll be sharing examples of great reports from cities, other energy efficiency advocacy organizations, and other public interest groups around the U.S. So this will probably be about a 30-minute presentation. So we'll have plenty of time at the end for Q&A, but since we are a super small group, if you have any burning questions or comments, I'm happy to entertain those as I go. Feel free to just, you know, speak up any time or use the chat window to send me a message. With that, just a little background on Resource Media. The company I work for, we're a nonprofit communications firm that helps environmental and public interest groups advance their causes, from energy efficiency to clean energy to social justice and everything in between. We work on campaigns to help make the world a better place. I like to say we are PR for the good guys. And I'm the gal on the bottom row, second to the end on the right. This is Stacking Debbie Slobe. I lead our energy efficiency program. I've been with Resource Media for over 6 years, helping energy efficiency advocates in cities advance different policies and regulations to eradicate energy waste. I've been doing a ton of work with cities and IMT on benchmarking policy, zero net energy buildings, building energy codes, different utility regulation schemes, and energy efficiency resource standards. Those are the types of policies and initiatives that I'm working to help folks move forward. A lot of my clients are probably some pretty, well-known organizations to you all. The American Council for an Energy Efficient Economy, New Buildings Institute, of course IMT, many, many different cities. And through the course of my work with all these different organizations, I've worked on literally dozens and dozens of reports. It's what some of these groups do the best. And what I've seen with reports is that if they're packaged and promoted well, they can be really powerful communication tools for both advocates and cities to advance their causes and influence decision makers. So how many of you remember the McKinsey report from 2009? Does this chart look familiar to anybody?
This is Katrina. This is probably the reason I work on energy efficiency today.
Absolutely. This is, you're probably familiar with this chart. This maps out the cost versus savings potential of dozens of energy efficiency measures. All told, the report found that the U.S. could reduce energy use by 23% and eliminate $1.2 trillion in energy waste by 2020 by implementing all of these different measures. As you're aware, this chart has been cited and reproduced hundreds of times since its release already 6 years ago. And I'm sure all of you are familiar with ACEEE's City Energy Efficiency Scorecard, right? No doubt you and everyone you work with care a great deal about how your city ranks and where your city stands in this national ranking. Here are, and you're not alone, here are some tweets. Katrina, maybe you even helped make this tweet happen. But you can see that decision makers are paying attention to these types of reports. Here are some tweets that were generated when this report came out. Here's one retweet from Mayor Hancock in Denver and Mayor Hales in Portland with his own original tweet, or staff-produced original tweet. And Mayor Adler retweet from Austin. Clearly, local decision makers were paying attention to this report. And when ACEEE, when the state scorecard comes out, you can bet that state-level decision makers are also paying attention. I've actually sat in a Colorado Public Utility Commission meeting where the chairman actually referenced this report, which at the time had Colorado ranked 19 out of 51. And he asked his colleagues right then and there during an official proceeding on energy efficiency with our local utility. He asked, what can we do? And he was confronting the utility. What can we do to move up in the ranks? And today, as you can see on this map, Colorado is now 13. So we're getting closer to the top 10. So clearly, reports can be great communication tools and help influence progress on energy efficiency. And let's just take a moment to review, what makes them so powerful. First of all, they provide research-backed evidence about the energy-saving opportunities that exist and the policies that are working to unlock that savings. They can also, because they often contain some really big, impressive data points and numbers, they can make some good headlines. They also can have a really long shelf life, as you saw with the McKinsey report, and and ACEEE reports are always sort of cited here and there with different media coverage around energy efficiency. They have that nice long shelf life. They can be cited again and again as needed by advocates and reporters. They can also be used by energy efficiency proponents near and far So what one city or one region learns about the potential for energy savings and policies in their area can be extremely useful for other cities and regions working to advance the same policies in their area. So remember, when you create a report, other cities are looking to your city as proof that benchmarking policy is working. And this is the type of evidence that's going to help them move their own policies forward. Reports can also influence decision makers, as we've seen with ACEEE reports and others. But while reports can be very good communication tools, sometimes energy efficiency advocates and experts don't always think of them in that way. They tend to think of them as just kind of a big data dump. They tend to just write and release a report simply because they have the data to work with, they're going to share it, or they have a deadline to meet in order to publish this information. And they don't always necessarily think about the strategy behind a report. So keeping in mind a report is a communication tool, and just like with any other communication product you might work on, its development and promotion should be guided by a strategic goal. You should be asking yourself and asking your team, what change do we want to see in our city? What decision makers do we want to influence? What do we want to prove or disprove with our information? Whether your goal is to influence policy outcomes or demonstrate policy success or demonstrate city leadership, that goal needs to be clear and clear from the start. And while reports have the potential to be great communication tools, they also can be extremely challenging to package and promote effectively. And I'll go over a couple of those reasons why that aren't new to you. But most reports aren't really written in a way that sort of your everyday real person can easily understand. They're generally pretty dense, data heavy. They're generally written documents meant to be downloaded and read offline. They're also often written for expert audiences like economists and engineers and policy analysts. These are generally the only people that tend to read these types of reports cover to cover, but these aren't necessarily the people who are ultimately making policy decisions or will be writing a story about the report. And speaking of journalists, reports can be their worst nightmare sometimes. They can be super hard to digest. They can take a lot of time to make sense of in order to be able to write a story about them. And this is time that reporters just simply don't have if they're trying to write a story on it under a tight deadline, or if they've got multiple stories they're trying to tackle in a day. They just don't have that kind of time. And a couple other things sort of working against the report as a communication tool is that oftentimes they aren't necessarily breaking news. These are findings that you guys have been working on for a long time. It's not necessarily a big announcement or breaking news, so there's no urgency necessarily to cover them. So other stories can easily trump a report that is basically seen as evergreen and can be covered another day or just cited as a footnote to another story. Reports also often lack a human interest angle. Oftentimes there aren't any real personal stories or local stories to illuminate the findings that can draw a reporter's attention. Also, it's extremely challenging for TV or other broadcast media to cover reports because for them, for broadcasters, no visuals and no talking heads basically means no story. But we can get past these obstacles and create reports that grab the attention of decision makers and the media and ultimately have greater impact. And here are some ways we can do that. First, we want to start by giving our executive summaries a makeover. Executive summaries are usually the only part of a report, sadly, that people read, so they need to be very concise, persuasive, visual, and able to stand on their own. Second, we can be creating simple fact sheets that pull all of our key points together in one page. A good fact sheet can make your case and essentially write the story by itself. Third, we want to be using visuals like infographics and photography to illustrate key points and give your audience a break from the text and something fun to share or repost online. And fourth, we want to be adding personal stories to reports, so stories of people, businesses, or communities that are taking advantage of energy-saving opportunities or benefiting from policies. Stories like these can help bring reports to life and help people visualize how these policies can actually benefit them and their communities and be a lot less abstract in their mind. And finally, moving beyond print, reports don't have to be written documents that just gather dust on shelves. And in today's media-rich world, report content can be delivered in so many ways, so many new ways. And none of these are essentially all that new. There's presentations, videos, scrolling websites, interactive features, and more. And they can also be promoted in new ways, such as social media memes and other shareable graphics. So let's get into each one of these sort of individually and show some examples. So for all the hard work that we tend to put into our reports, the sad truth is that oftentimes people don't read further than the executive summary. I know I'm guilty of this, and I'll bet some of you are too. And if we aren't reading beyond the executive summary, we can safely assume that others aren't too, especially busy policymakers and harried reporters. So it's really crucial that our executive summaries can stand on their own. They should get to our key points right away and not bury them behind a lengthy introduction. So things like policy background, research methodology, acknowledgments, those types of elements, those can all go in the body of the report. And oftentimes what I find when I'm reviewing partners' draft reports is that sometimes they put the most important information and the most compelling points in the conclusion. So the strongest case they're making is actually buried in the last page. So there have been many times where I've advised people to take content from the conclusion and put it right up at the top, right up in the executive summary. And titles can be very important. These are basically your first opportunity to get your message across and help set the tone of coverage and conversation that follows around this report. So this example that you see before you right now, this is from the Southwest Energy Efficiency Project, or SWEEP. They came up with a really catchy title, the $20 billion Bonanza. It's an ode to the Old West, which is great because SWEEP covers Southwest states, as well as it puts their biggest and most compelling finding right at the top, the $20 billion in potential energy savings in the Southwest. And here's another good summary from NRDC, and also another really good title. This report's key finding was that advances in energy efficiency were largely responsible for a dramatic increase in U.S. energy productivity over the last 40 years. So using a positive message in the title, America's amazingly good energy news, it's a great way to set the tone for the whole report, how it's perceived by policymakers, and how it's covered in the media. Another pretty simple way to improve the impact of reports is to create fact sheets. Fact sheets are even more concise than executive summaries. They contain all of the report's key points in one place in easy to understand language. This is another example from SWEEP from their $20 billion Bonanza report. All that anyone really needs to know about the report can be found right here on this one-page fact sheet. So having a fact sheet like this makes it super easy for policymakers in the media to be able to digest a report's key findings quickly. They're also nice, concise pieces that people can easily print off or email or share with others. And here is another example from ACEEE. They created colorful fact sheets for each city they ranked in the scorecard this year. This is one obviously for Boston. The information here is presented both visually through the use of progress bars, icons, and colors, and also verbally with the bullet points and titling. But again, this is just a super concise way to highlight key points that's also really easy for people to share. And then another good strategy for improving reports is using infographics. So infographics can be really great ways to get across key points and messages in a visually interesting and compelling way. And people love infographics. People love to share them on social media and online. And they don't have to be super fancy or expensive pieces to create, like you see with this one here from Sweep. This is just a super simple visual representation of the road to riches, what makes up that 20 billion in Bonanza, the road to riches that awaits states that take advantage of energy efficiency opportunities. This is one that was actually first created in-house by one of our program staff, and then we took it to a designer to clean up for just a couple $100s. Later, I'm going to show you a graphic that we did for the city of Minneapolis, also using a free graphic design tool. So these things don't necessarily have to cost a lot of money to produce. Or you can, go the more produced route. Infographics can be more graphically rich, like this one that we produced with an outside design firm for a toxic algae report that we put together a couple years ago. Another excellent tactic is to include stories of people, businesses, or communities that are benefiting from the programs and policies. So this particular example is from the Children's Hospital of Alabama's annual report. This is a story of Nia Turner. She's the little girl there. She's a young girl who was born with sickle cell disease who's being treated by the hospital. And this is one of several stories that were front and center on the hospital's online annual report. So stories like these that can illustrate how real people are benefiting from an organization's work can really help drive home the value of these programs and policies in a very real and emotional way for people. These are also the kinds of stories that the media love to cover. And then a little later, I'm going to show you some examples of stories of building owners featured in city benchmarking reports. So moving beyond print and looking at a couple of less traditional ways to make reports come to life. A couple of ways you can do that is through presentations and videos. These obviously take more time and resources to produce than fact sheets, but they sort of serve a similar purpose, is to get your key points across in an easy-to-digest format. And like with infographics, they can also add a nice visual element to a traditional report, and they're much more likely to be viewed and shared than a written report. And again, here's an example from Sweep, from the 20 Billion Bonanza report. Not only did the report have that nice spiffy title, a snappy executive summary, and a simple infographic, it also rolled out with regional and state presentations. So Sweep's executive director, Howard Geller, he gave these presentations to utility commissions in each state, and they were also provided as downloadable files on Sweep's website for anyone to view. For Charity Water's 2012 annual report, they created a sweet little video, which was a montage of highlights of their year's work in the field, set to upbeat music. It's just like a rolling 2 minutes of different clips from things that they've been doing in the field. And in 2014, the International Energy Agency, they also included a presentation with its 2014 Energy Efficiency Market Report. This was presented in person as well as made available to anyone via its website. Another way to make reports come alive, but admittedly takes bigger investment of time and money, is to create scrolling websites. We've seen this format take over the report space in recent years. Some of the best examples are coming from foundations, advocacy organizations, and public health organizations like this one from the Kellogg Foundation. And I've included URLs for each of these that I'm going to share with you, so later on you can go and see for yourself on your computer what it looks like. Charity Water in 2012 also put together a lovely scrolling website for its annual report that year. And again, Children's Hospital of Alabama. So scrolling websites can actually be created in-house using WordPress. That's what we use. It's a free online publishing tool. And if you were to think about hiring an outside firm to put that together for you, it would probably run you between $3,000 and $10,000 depending on the complexity of your report. We've created several simple and elegant scrolling sites for partners in the $3,000 to $5,000 range. That just gives you an idea of what it costs to put something like that together. But a super cheap and easy way to make reports come to life and have more impact on social media is to create social media friendly graphics like the ones that ACEEE had to promote its city scorecard report this year. So this is one of the images that was going around online and on Twitter for Boston that week. And here's one for Chicago. And when I say social media friendly, I mean creating graphics that are small and simple enough so that they show well on Twitter and on Instagram and Facebook streams. So, you know, a really big scrolling infographic is not going to translate well on social media. I'm sure you've seen it in your Hootsuite streams and other things where, you know, people are trying to squish something that's really hard to see in a stream like that. So if you want to share an infographic on Twitter, the best practice is to kind of create a smaller teaser-like version and include a link to the full report and graphic in your Twitter message. So, you know, when you're creating these, you just want to be mindful of picking a good, compelling image, not many words, and a large enough font for it to be seen on a Twitter stream, and a graphic that can, in the size of shape of your graphic, that can easily be translated to those different streams. And so this was actually the first year that ACEEE used these shareable graphics in their social media promotion, and we've been working with them on these reports for a number of years. And we found that the pickup on Twitter, the number of tweets and retweets and clicks to the report from Twitter increased exponentially this year compared to previous years, and we suspect it had a lot to do with these graphics. And then finally, interactive features like slideshows, maps, or interactive infographics can really spice up reports. And this is an example of a slideshow we created for a toxic algae report. This show helped illustrate with very vivid and sometimes horrifying photos of the devastating impacts of nitrogen pollution on America's lakes. And then this is an example from the New Buildings Institute. It's an interactive map of all ZNE buildings in the USA. And this was launched in conjunction with their 2014 Getting to Zero report. And then this is another example from ACEEE of an interactive infographic. The very first city scorecard that they launched in 2013, it contained an interactive infographic. So this is just a screenshot, but on that graphic you could go to any of those dots around the United States and click on that. It would highlight that city, its rank, its score, and then the bottom would repopulate with all the information about that particular city. So these are just a couple examples of interactive features, and interactives also don't have to necessarily cost a lot to produce. So the toxic algae slideshow that you saw the screenshot of, this was actually created in-house using a free tool called PhotoSnack, and also using free photos that were donated from partners and supporting photojournalists. And then the ZNE map that was also created in-house using a free tool called Mapbox, and the data set was provided by NBI. So, these things, they definitely take staff time to produce, but often there are free tools available to help you put it all together and launch them online. So now that you've got yourself, an awesome report, what's the best way to pitch this out to the media? And the bottom line is you want to make it as easy as possible for reporters to cover it. You want to make sure that the report is timely and newsworthy, that it contains compelling stories and stats, that reporters have access to interview sources, and that you've prepared ahead of time. You've got some supporting articles, letters to the editor, social media messages ahead of time that you can just deploy. And let's talk about each of those things individually. So first things first, timing is everything. You want to be strategic in your timing of the release of your report. You don't just release it because it's done. As I've said before, you should have a strategic reason for releasing a report. Maybe you're trying to influence policymakers to approve a new energy-saving measure, or you want to release it. So that, in that case, you'd want to release it like a week or two before their vote. Or maybe you're trying to urge building owners to benchmark their properties on time, so you want to release it near your compliance deadline. So think about what your goal is for the report and time its release accordingly. You also need to show journalists that the report is timely and newsworthy. Like I mentioned before, these folks tend to think of reports as fairly evergreen and not breaking news. So some ways you can do this is to, when you set up your pitch or your press release, is to tie it to current events or related energy issues that reporters are already paying attention to. Right now, it could be the Clean Power Plan and what that looks like for your state. It could be a city announcement or upcoming vote on local energy policy, but help them contextualize the information that you're sending so that they understand its newsworthiness and its relevance in where the city is headed in terms of energy policy and energy efficiency. And you also want to give reporters some heads up that it's coming. Again, like I said before, these can be really hard to cover for some folks, and it's just not generally something they can cover the same day of receiving it. So they need some time to sift through it. One thing you might want to consider is if you've got a couple of super trusted reporters that you've worked with before, that will honor an embargo, and offering them an embargoed copy of the report. And that means you give them an advance copy of the report on the condition that they don't write about it until its official release. So that will give some of those key folks the time they need to sort through that. Another good tactic is to provide a pre-prepared story or two of a local business or organization that's taking advantage of energy-saving opportunities. This would be a story that you would develop ahead of time. So, you've already talked to the business owner, you've already captured some of their story, already collected some photos, maybe some quotes, and their contact information, and then you can then turn that around and provide it to the reporter for them to do their own story when you issue the report and the press release. So reporters love big stats, rankings, and lists. They love this stuff. Here are some headlines from reports that I've already talked about already. ACEEE state and city scorecards, the SWEEP $20 billion Bonanza report. You can see that big savings, stats, and rankings dominate the headlines. So a good practice with any report is to distill just the one or two most compelling key points or big stats from your report and lead with them in your media outreach. Use them as the anchors for the rest of your report findings and the rest of your press release. And you all are probably pretty familiar with ACEEE and know how they kick out dozens of reports and white papers every year. They're very, very prolific in their report writing. Well, we did an analysis of press pickup of their reports over the course of a whole year. There was about 53 pieces that they issued that year, and press that they did around 53 reports that year. And we found that the reports that were ranking reports or reports with really big energy savings potential numbers or other big stats in them and in their titles and headlines, they got the most pickup by far, several times more coverage than any other type of report that they work on. So we don't think it's any accident now that ACEEE now has 4 different ranking reports it issues every year. They've got the state scorecard, the city scorecard, the international scorecard, and the Green Car report. And with your benchmarking reports, given the nature of the data that's being collected and that it's annual, you also have the potential to use some sort of lists or friendly rankings or big energy saving statistics to generate headlines. And you will see later what Seattle was able to do with some big energy saving stats in their report. So reporters are also going to be looking for someone to comment on your report. So you want to be sure to have interview sources, some folks ready to respond. And prepping report authors and supporters ahead of time is key. Make sure everyone is on the same page in regards to messaging, the key points, what topics to avoid, how to answer hard questions, and ways to bridge back to key points when necessary. You could also organize a press teleconference featuring report authors and supporters, no more than maybe 3 speakers in total, on the day of the release. And it would absolutely help if you had, let's say, like a high-ranking official like a mayor or a council person or the head of your sustainability department to kick it off, and that will help attract media and get them listening in. Or if you have a particular journalist or blogger that you really want to cover the report, you could offer that person an exclusive interview with a supporter or someone that's that's an author or a city official. And another good practice is to provide reporters a list of interview sources. So these would be people, again, that you've already vetted. They're prepped to speak to the press. And then you could also provide prepared statements from these same people as backup in case no interviews are done. And another good proactive tactic is to pre-prepare opinion pieces and guest blog posts from your supporters or elected officials. Again, having something written from your mayor or city council member can really help with getting these stories placed. You should also be ready to dominate the response to coverage should a story be written. So thinking about letters to the editor and online comments, you want to do your best to ensure that your supporting voices are the first to be heard. So preparing some, draft LTEs and online comments ahead of time so that they can be deployed right away by your supporters as soon as the story comes out. That's a way you can help ensure that the supporters have the first response rather than opposing viewpoints. And you can also be very proactive using social media, creating tweets and Facebook updates ahead of time so that your supporters can send them out as soon as the report goes out. And you can even use social media to spread excitement about a report ahead of its release. We do this a lot with ACEEE with its scorecard reports. We have them and their supporters sending teaser tweets out and teaser Facebook updates about a week before the actual release of the report. And so now that I've shared with you some tips for improving reports and working with reporters, I just wanted to take the last couple minutes and share with you some examples of some of these tips in action in some city benchmarking reports that I'm sure a lot of you are pretty familiar with. So the first example I want to share is from Minneapolis. The city, we helped the city create this simple infographic to go along with its latest benchmarking report. And this was created in-house using a free graphic creation tool called Piktochart. So it really only took staff time and some data from the city to put this together. We didn't have to hire outside design to put it together. The city posted this graphic on its website alongside its press release, and then we used it to promote the report on social media. Another great example is Philadelphia. The city has done a ton of great work with interactives. You've probably seen this building energy benchmarking data visualization tool. It allows you to see benchmarking data on each building in map form, as well as charts and graphs. You can compare one building to another. This tool is also housed on a very slick scrolling website. And the city also created this really nice flipbook, a digital flipbook of its report, so you can view it online without having to download it. You can also see here how nicely the report is designed with some strong imagery and graphics and a lot of white space around the text, which makes it a lot easier to read. And here we have Chicago. The city did a really super job with storytelling and imagery with its most recent report. You can see here this report, it featured full-page testimonials from building managers like this school facility manager here. Those are quotes from that gentleman about their experiences with benchmarking and energy saving successes. There were several of these full-page features inside the report. And finally, an example from Seattle, where the city did a really great job with press outreach around its latest report. They used storytelling to illustrate the benefits of benchmarking. As seen here, this is just a little snap of a guest opinion from Corey Weathers. He's an energy consultant who helped a local retirement community, Horizon House Retirement Community. It happened to be where his grandmother lived. Benchmark its energy use, and then go on to save tens of thousands of dollars on energy bills. And so we worked with Corey to capture that story and the inspiration that he took from his own grandmother, who was the one who actually brought him into the project and said, hey, we need some help here, and can you take this on? And Seattle focused, Seattle focused, did this good storytelling. They also focused its media outreach on the big stats that buildings had the potential to save up to $90 million a year through greater energy efficiency. This finding was emphasized in their infographic that they created. And then, as you can see from some of these headlines, reporters just glommed onto that stat and ran with it in their stories. So I hope what I've shared with you today will be helpful as you prepare your own benchmarking reports. And we'd love the opportunity to help you, so please do not hesitate to give us a ring. And this is my contact information, but I'm also included my team leader's contact information. Her name's Amy Frickman. Jason might have mentioned at the top of the call, I'm actually leaving Resource Media to take a year off to travel with my family. And next Wednesday is my last day in the office. So for any follow-up, please contact Amy. We have a great team at Resource Media working on these issues, working very closely with a lot of energy efficiency partners and cities. And so you'll be in good hands with or without me. Thanks again, and happy to entertain any questions you may have, or just want to launch into discussion about what you guys are planning with your own reports.
Great, thanks, Debbie. That was a really interesting overview, and I guess my big takeaway is that issuing a report is much more than just printing a report and putting it out there. It's really a whole campaign that you're putting together around it. the various ways to present the information, as well as how to communicate the results in an effective way. So thanks for sharing all of that. Anybody have any specific questions we want to start with in our discussion? Okay, or anything that people are willing to share on upcoming plans for reports that you have coming up? Anything that you're thinking about doing differently than you've done in the past, either based on this presentation or just other thoughts you've been having on what you might want to be doing with next round's reports? Do you have anything there? Sorry, go ahead.
This is Jennifer Gunby. I've got a question. You kind of touched on a little bit with having an executive session, executive summary that maybe all people read. But when it comes to overall length of the report and balancing teasers in the report and a lot more in the appendix so that you don't lose people in their short attention span when they see a really big report, do you have any thoughts on saving some information for an appendix to physically make the report feel shorter when people look at it?
Yeah, that's a great idea, and I've seen a lot of organizations go in that same direction, where the report is pretty much a lot of the key findings, and they do it, pretty quickly in maybe no more than 10 pages, and then a lot of the methodology and detailed charts and things like that can be found in the appendix. I think that's I think that's great. We're actually even trying to do that here at Resource Media in our own research reports. We do a bunch of different market research reports throughout the year, and we are also always trying to follow our own rules on putting those together. So short, the shorter the better, in our opinion.
Thanks.
Hi, Debbie and Jason. This is Jamie Falsay in Chicago with C40. Thanks very much for taking time to share these findings and for the survey across our city's communications and media and reports, and especially for the shout-outs to Chicago. Thanks for those. We've definitely worked closely with Debbie and Elio and Amy and the Resource Media team and through City Energy Project on our communications last year, and we're definitely moving forward into reporting and storytelling season again. I think that these conversations are great for kind of raising awareness and helping cities not necessarily converge on the same storytelling style or the same exact metrics that we're reporting on, but really making sure that there is continuity and consistency across markets with all of our many audiences in mind. I think that sometimes we find ourselves trying to create reports or trying to create profiles or scorecards or infographics that tell all stories to all stakeholder groups in all ways. And what we're finding in Chicago is that customization roles, that we're always looking for ways to reach specific audiences with specific messages, and then getting smarter about those audiences and what they need to hear, what motivates action as we go. So I think it is very helpful for cities to stay in the loop on what each other are doing, especially as the body of cities that have, or the cohort of cities that have benchmarking and other energy policies and programs on the books and in action. As that number grows, there's more and more to try to keep track of. So the role of groups like Resource Media and City Energy Project and other networks is really critical. But thank you for the work that you're doing. I think all of our cities are always interested in new ways to capture media's attention, to make the energy story compelling, to identify some of those key rankings or the engaging stories, and always highlighting the firsts or the biggest or the best among the cohort to get media's attention. So thanks for keeping this conversation going. I think there may be a lot of folks out on an early holiday, but we can certainly keep the discussion going among the group of people doing these communications.
Great, thanks, Jamie. Actually, I've got a question for you, Debbie. One is that these reports have always been in the past the big annual event, because that's the time when all of the fresh data came out and people could sort of drill into things and understand how well the program has been working and things like that. We've got a pretty heavy emphasis now on using websites, data visualization tools, and things like that. There's actually, I don't know how involved you've been, but there's an entire initiative within CEP to look at the role of data visualization and the ability to use that as a tool. And you alluded to websites, as one piece of the campaign, but what I could see happening is that there wouldn't necessarily be, a big event. There'll just be a website that perhaps is refreshed once a year, but more likely there'll be a sort of rolling update. There's always, more current information available on the website, which would allude to a lot of the things that you talked about here. Maybe not so much the storytelling, although that could be added to the site as well. But I wonder if you have any general comments on how that would change the approach if it's no longer like the once-a-year big splash of here's our fresh data, but it's more that the city's role is to keep the public continually updated on how things have been going with the program.
That's a really good question, and just as a sort of example, NBI, the New Buildings Institute, is sort of in that same place with its annual Getting to Zero status update. Even, I guess more so than benchmarking, sort of the number of buildings that are being developed is always a moving target, and there's always new information coming in, and they were in this position of like, well, do we even do a report? We have now. They are they use a database, but they still, and I think this is a good thing for cities to do, and maybe you do it on a calendar year basis. Draw some sort of line in the sand where you are able to have a big splash status update. This is where we are now, and here are some of the key findings. Because I think it's important to show progress and milestones. And I don't know if you want to do that like on a January or calendar New Year kickoff-y kind of basis, or there's another more opportunistic time of year where that makes sense. But I think whether it's annual or quarterly or semi-annual, I think it's still important to not necessarily draft a massive report, but look at what's there and share those findings and share those successes and share that progress on a regular basis to keep this a top of mind initiative that's happening. You don't want it to just sort of get lost in the shuffle, and I imagine that your audiences are going to shift and change over time too, where you're talking a lot more to tenants and folks that are looking for properties, looking for places to rent or start up their businesses or whatever, and they're going to want to have some sort of place they can go and have a quick snapshot of where the best properties are for what they're looking for in terms of energy efficiency.
Great, that's really helpful. Okay. Anybody else have any other questions or comments?
Debbie, this is Katrina in Denver, and since we're a small group, I might ask a question a bit off the topic of benchmarking, but Denver is releasing our climate action plan in about a month, and I was wondering if you have any particular thoughts on the way to tell really great stories as part of a big document like that, because it's such a, so comprehensive in itself that I'm not sure how to tell great stories and give it that hook, if you had any recommendations specific to that.
Well, I would imagine that there are a lot of really great success stories throughout the city of communities or businesses that have done, made a lot of progress in reducing their footprints. And so my suggestion would be to, find those if you don't already know who those groups are, and kind of capture, kind of like we said in this presentation, capture and prepackage those types of stories, feature them right in the report, provide them as in your pitches to the local press, provide that information, and access to those interview sources, or setting up tours for local reporters to, here's the report, and then here you can kind of walk in the shoes of some of these groups that are making good progress. So maybe setting up a time and place for reporters to go and tour these areas or tour these communities or these businesses and see what they're doing.
Thanks, that's really helpful. And the report itself is probably largely done and doesn't have stories in it, but but I wonder if there's a way to tell stories in a fact sheet or something that accompanies the report, sort of what this means to different people in the community, because I think we know a lot of those stories that just they didn't get written into it. So thanks for the thought.
Even if it's not written into the story, that doesn't. You can still, find those stories out there and pitch them at the same time as the report's going out, and that will, you can still try and get that placed in coverage and help. The stories can help anchor the report. And a lot of times, and you've probably seen this too, it's like reporters like to be storytellers. They like to start with that sort of first-person perspective about what this means and how it impacts them personally or their community personally. And so even if that story isn't in the report itself, you can always offer that, as an aside when you're sending something like that out, because that's what they're going to be looking for. If someone's going to try and cover a report like that, usually they're going to be, if trying to find something like that to make it a more human interest story so their readers are more interested in it.
Great, thanks.
Great. All right, and with that, I think we're going to have to wrap up the call. So again, Debbie, thank you so much for the presentation today. And I think I speak for everybody when I say I hope you have a fabulous year traveling about.
Thank you.
I have to admit I'm a little bit envious, but love to hear how things go and all the adventures you have with your family there.
Thank you. I'll send a note out next week with how to stay in touch and follow us if you want. But I really hope, when the year is over and I'm back in the swing of things, I'm sure we'll all be back in touch. I mean, I'll never shake this energy efficiency gig. It's too good.
Great, great.
Love
and
it.
for everybody else, it's not a full year, but have a great long weekend. And we'll talk to you all again soon.
Best of luck, Debbie, and thanks, Jason.
All right.
Thanks,
take care.
everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.